just want to make sure that we respect everyone's time and that we get folks back and on to the next thing in their lives in a timely manner. So welcome everyone to the winter quarter town hall. As you all know, we talked about every other town hall, every other gathering we would call something different. And so this would be more of an opportunity for us to engage around an issue that's been brought forward by the community. So that would be our town hall, and then every other month then would be sort of a campus update where we come and actually just give you a lot of information and answer questions about what's going on campus. So today's format is the town hall, where we are engaging with an issue that has been brought forward by the community, and that is decriminalizing UWT. I want to start by doing our land acknowledgement, and then we have a pretty full agenda. And we recognize that all of us at UWT learn, live, and work on or near the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people. In particular, we are situated on the traditional territory of the Puyallup. As people on this occupied territory, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the land, the ancestors who have cared for this land since time immemorial, and all of our indigenous connections today. We also have the responsibility to acknowledge the histories of dispossession and forced removal that have allowed for the growth and survival of this institution. In light of this history, let us take an active effort to partner with our indigenous community members and neighbors as we continue our work together as a community of learners, leaders, and educators. So as I said, we have a very full agenda. I want to thank all of those who have worked on this issue. It started before my time here at UWT. I'm going to go review the work that has been done here at UWT, go through the task force that was appointed as a result of some demands that were made and the recommendations that came out of that. And then I had a meeting with task force members in the fall, and we talked about some ways forward that we could actually make the recommendations actionable rather than having it just be a report that's sat on a shelf. And then we're going to open it up to discussion and observations and questions. We did not get any questions in advance, but I fully anticipate that we will get some questions as we are moving forward. And as always, the vice chancellors are here to answer questions that I may not know the answer to because I haven't been here long enough or not fully immersed in all of the issues. So let's just jump right into why we are here today. As you all know, May of 2020 set off a series of issues in our country that had been sort of bubbling since a number of murders were coming to light in the national press. But here in Tacoma, the murder of Manny Ellis and then George Floyd actually started a really serious conversation about what we meant about defunding and divesting from the Tacoma Police Department, and an examination of what the UWT's relationship would and should be with the Tacoma Police Department. So there was a group of organizers who presented demands to then Chancellor Pagano and Executive Vice Chancellor Purdy. And as a result of that report, that letter, there were a series of listening sessions that were held in the fall, and there was a suggestion that the Chancellor create a task force, and that task force actually look at the things that were in the original 5 demands, investigate gaps on campus, and make some recommendations for what we could do differently here on campus. And that task force submitted its report to Chancellor Pagano in spring of I think it was May of 2021. Well, you all know that Chancellor Pagano stepped down shortly thereafter. He did get a chance to take it to cabinet, was my understanding, but other than that, there was no campus conversation about it, and other than the members of the task force and the cabinet who saw the original task force report, there wasn't really a wide campus conversation about it. So when I met with task force, we agreed that one of the things that we needed to do was make this work more broadly known to the campus community and have campus conversation about it. A lot of things have happened since then, but that was really the impetus for how we got here today. We were planning to do this in January, but you all know we had something like COVID come back and change everyone's lives. And I should let you all know, everyone's like commenting on my shoes. In case you all don't know, I have 2 autoimmune diseases, which causes joint problems. And because of COVID, I have not been able to have my treatment. I'm getting it next week, though. And hopefully after next week, you won't see me in tennis shoes anymore. But COVID has just changed everything for us. So that delayed us having this community conversation. But I'm so happy that we're getting ready to have it today. So the original 5 demands, just to remind folks, if you were not here, it was that the university stopped using the Tacoma Police Department to respond to welfare checks under the Safe Campus program, that we stop using the Tacoma Police Department for security at campus events, and that if we're going to stop using them for campus events, that we not replace them with some other armed law enforcement agency, and that we publicly commit to not hiring former police officers with disciplinary records on our security team here, and that we publicly commit to never inviting ICE and Border Patrol. I was like, okay, they changed the name, but Border Patrol to campus for any reason. So those were the original 5 demands, and there was a response from the chancellor that folks felt was not adequate, so they wanted to have listening sessions, which were held, and out of that listening session grew this task force. So the task force was, for each of those original 5 demands, they went through and identified what the problems were that those demands were attempting to address and what gaps we had on campus. So they went through, what personnel is responsible for these actions on our campus? What are the key policies and things that would govern our responses related to the 5 demands? And then they offered recommendations based on, so you had your original demand, and then they said, once they did that analysis and got to the root of what the issue was, then they issued a set of recommendations, and they combined 2 and 3, because that was about events on campus and having security and who would do that. And then that was sent to, as I said, to Chancellor Picano, who shared it with Cabinet. And then I got here in September and wondered what had happened, because I'd heard that there was a report, and on my prior campus this was a big issue as well, and so wanted to know what we had done with it. So here are the recommendations. By the way, a link to the task force report will be available. It is available. It was in the announcement that went out about this meeting today, but it will also be available. We always follow up these monthly gatherings with an email just sort of summarizing, and so we'll put the link to that task force report in the follow-up, but it's also in the invitation to the meeting today. It's on the website, but my understanding is it can be pretty hard to find. But I think it's important for us to acknowledge the work that this task force did and sort of call out what they asked us to do. So one, they wanted us to do more to inform the campus about the campus resources that we have available to assist when there is a student who's in crisis or a student of concern. And they wanted to better educate students about the counseling services that we had. So it was called CAPS, it's since been renamed PAWS, Professional and Counseling Services. So when you see CAPS, just know that's PAWS, is that right, Menta? Yeah, so that's a new name. And so they wanted us to do more to let students know about the resources that are available to students, including off-campus resources like the Pierce County Crisis Line. And then we wanted to develop an on-campus after-hours procedure for the campus to use when there's an immediate concern about the safety and welfare of students, and provide mental health first aid training or similar training to the campus community to help them when dealing with a student in distress. And then they asked for a couple of funding issues. One, to provide funding for a UWT mobile operations crisis team to respond to crisis and ensure that they create protocols to ensure that the Tacoma Police Department would not be involved unless legally necessary. And then they wanted us to create a position to address the crisis needs of our campus. And this position would garner resources within the university and partner both off campus to respond to student mental health and social crisis. And as I said, they combined demands 2 and 3 about what we would do for events. And those recommendations were to provide a clear policy for when and why armed police would come onto our campus. And it shouldn't be limited to armed police presence, but also understanding what's legally required, because we'd heard that some police officers are required to always have their uniform or gun. So we wanted to better understand what those rules were around state, federal, and city legal requirements. And then a notification system. So if there are armed or uniformed officers on campus, should we include that in our alert system so that the campus knows ahead of time? Because one of the issues that was raised was this was triggering for students and for other community members who've had negative interactions with the police, and they wanted, if we were going to have armed folks on campus, some way of letting the campus know ahead of time so that they wouldn't come on campus. And then there was a concern that our campus and security team didn't necessarily have the training or the tools to best prepare for when the Tacoma Police Department would be called on campus for assistance. And so the recommendation is that we should do more training about the relationship between our campus security team and making sure that they have the training and resources to be able to say, no, we don't want TPD in this instance, and yes, it's necessary in another instance. The fourth demand was to publicly commit to not hiring police officers, and they wanted us to really look at how we hire police officers, and not police officers, our campus and security team members, and to really align that with Senate Bill 5051. And write some best practices into how you identify whether someone has a past history of excessive use of force, for example, or inappropriate behavior. And they wanted us to determine what kinds of disciplinary records and histories are problematic and incompatible. So if someone had something in their employment history that we thought was just an absolute no, it would be an immediate no. So we wanted to identify what those things are. And then work with our HR team and our campus safety team to craft job descriptions that would actually attract folks who would be committed to a viable and safe campus for us. So really trying to craft job descriptions that speak to what kind of campus and security team members we want. And then ensure that when we are searching for team members, that we're including stakeholders from across the campus and community groups in the process in some way. And then the fifth demand to never invite ICE to campus or Border Patrol. This came up in the instance of folks who were recruiting and attending career fairs. So for in-person career fairs that would include law enforcement, required that there not be armed or uniformed. So they could participate if they weren't armed or uniformed. And then if it is against the policy, and as I mentioned earlier, there are some policies about when police officers can be out of uniform or without their firearms, to make it be online. So if they absolutely couldn't come, then make it online. And then again, making sure that the campus is notified and aware of what's happening with their presence. And then making sure that career services took into account the possible harm to students that might happen when an employer comes to a career fair. And so to develop some kind of rubric to follow for inclusion in career fairs and include what constitutes harm to students. So when we sat down with the task force members, we tried to think about, okay, what can we do in response to some of these demands, especially in demand number one. It was all about, we need to make sure that the campus understands what we have available and then train to that And so the first really 4 recommendations were about better educating students, informing the campus, having some kind of training, and having protocols in place that people know about. Because when in the discussion and in the report, it became very clear that we actually have many of the things that were being recommended, but no one knew about them or they didn't know how to access them. And so what we agreed was that our advancement team, which is our communications team for the campus, that they and student affairs would actually partner this year to figure out how we can do this work about letting the campus know what we actually have available, like the purple sheet. There are many people who are like, what is the purple sheet and where do you find it? And so we want to make sure that we do that work and that it includes not just better informing, but actually letting students know on a consistent basis, on a regular basis, about the resources that are available to them. So we are committed to doing more outreach in that regard. And I have to say that as a new chancellor, when I got here, I did not expect to have budget problems. So when I was talking to the task force, I had just learned that our enrollments were down and we were facing a $4.3 million deficit in our budget. And we're actually, we're not in a position to add any new funding, any positions right now. What we're going to try to do, though, is leverage what we have in place already, including our advocate, I forget her name, advocate, a confidential advocate, which is a half-time funded position. So we're gonna try and leverage what we have right now, and then as our budget gets better, and particularly this is an issue in the legislative session this year, there's an opportunity that we might get money for mental health services for students. We're not sure that that's gonna happen, but I know that if it doesn't happen this legislative session, it is definitely on the agenda for the next legislative session for requests for that. So I have just said as your chancellor, I'm not in a position to fund any new positions. So it is not a hard no, it is a not at this time because we have a $4.3 million deficit. And related to demands 2 and 3, which was about the events, and so we have actually a protocol in place for when and why armed police are going to be on campus. The Tacoma police, they do have a new police chief, and so one of the things that I, as a new chancellor, and Van Smiley, as our new vice chancellor for finance and administration, we actually want to go and meet with this new person to talk about our expectations for if we needed to call Tacoma police officers, or if they are, in pursuit of something, or if there's something happening on Pacific Avenue, what we expect in terms of the when they do come on campus. And so to be just really clear and develop that protocol. And so that new police chief was just named, and I think he just started because he was here last week in Tacoma. So that will happen this quarter. And then we do want to continue to make sure that our campus safety and security team have the training and the resources that they need, and that they understand how to engage with Tacoma Police Department. And we have some instances of this happening already. So my understanding is we had an incident where the fire department was called, Tacoma Police Department came also, and our security team was really they did a really wonderful job of saying, no, we just need the fire department. We don't need the police department. So turning the police department away. So I think that we can do more of that. And I think as out in the community, as people get more aware of armed police officers are not the best responders to people in crisis. That's how we get this escalation of issues that end up with folks being hurt or killed. And so we're going to continue to refine how we engage with the Tacoma Police Department. But one of the things that came out was we actually don't use them for events. So that was when they looked into it, the original demand was stop using them for events. We don't use them for events. There are times when there are demonstrations or things where the Tacoma Police Department feel like the crowds are too large, they need to do crowd control, but we don't use them for events. And there is actually a protocol for events and how that all works. So, but we do know that we can do better in talking about how we engage, when we engage with Tacoma Police, and how our campus and security team engage with them. And so we are committed to doing that work. Number 4 was just really one of those where I was like, yes, of course, we would do all of those things. And we want to make sure that we're not hiring people who have been problems in other locations and bringing them onto our campus. So yes, we can do all of those things that were asked, and have our safety and security team work with HR to look at best practices for identifying which of those disciplinary practices or actions that are in someone's background are problematic for us here on campus. And then we'll continue to engage stakeholders as we have hiring committees for new positions. And then in terms of related to demand number 5 and the recommendations that came out of that, which was publicly commit to never inviting ICE and Border Patrol to campus for any reason. And what we've heard from students and from others is that there are students at UWT who actually want to work in law enforcement. And so what we have to do is figure out a way to have those students have opportunities, and there are courses and others where this is appropriate, but we need to have our own protocol in place to make sure that we are not harming our students. And so we are going to request that they not come in a uniform or armed, and if they have to do that, that we do some alternate venue and with notification ahead of time for that. So one of the things that happened as a result of the conversation was that there were some additional questions that were raised in the report about blanket criminal background checks as a condition of employment. And so former Executive Vice Chancellor Purdy actually committed then, when the original report was written, to stop doing it for faculty. The ones for staff is a UW HR issue, and we're continuing to work on why is it needed. And so that's an ongoing issue that has not been resolved, except for faculty here. And I know that one of our professors, Chris Beasley, is very interested in this, and I've told him when I met with him that we would continue to partner to the extent possible to see what we can do on this blanket criminal background check. In December, President Anna-Marie Kelsey announced this Reimagining Safety at UW, and a large part of that was really Seattle-centric because it was more about the UW Police Department, which is armed, but really looking at the structure of our Safe Campus, because Safe Campus is the organization that's responsible for responding to a lot of the issues around student safety and faculty and safety. This Reimagining Safety at UW will look different here at UWT, and our leadership team met with Sally Clark, who is leading that, to talk about how it relates to us here. And one of the things is Safe Campus and emergency management is definitely relevant for us here, but we don't have armed police officers. So one of the things that we've talked about, though, is I was able to poll the campus's Urban Serving University Coalition to ask them what they were doing. And so we're continuing to work with that coalition. And many of them are reimagining safety and really thinking about their relationships with police department and how they demilitarize their campuses. So I'll continue to be a part of that effort as well. And then we'll continue to monitor what this UW initiative looks like. And I'm on the leadership team for that, and we'll be active in that. So in the reports, in every report, there was in the initial list of demands and in the task force report, there was a paragraph about we should have a committee at UWT that actually holds the campus accountable for how we move forward on these issues. And I talked to the task force about it in my meeting, and I said, of course, we should do that. I think the sticking point is, like, who convenes it? And in the recommendation, it was, okay, we want something separate and apart from the chancellor. We don't want it to have anything to do with the chancellor's office. And I'm like, well, who's going to convene it? Who's going to make sure that the work happens if that? So still, I am committed to having some kind of safety committee that advises me, that holds me accountable for movement on this. I think it's, the question becomes, well, how do you populate that and how do you staff that if it's an independent, standalone group? So I'm open to appointing one. I've seen models from other urban serving universities of these committees, and they do, even if they're appointed by the president or the chancellor, they can continue to raise issues and say, what about this? Or you said you were going to do this and it hasn't happened yet. So we have a draft, and I would love to be able to move forward on this. So any advice and counsel that you all have, I invite you to send me notes about that, because I think that's going to be the thing. Even when I was meeting with the task force, I'm like, you wrote this report, who's going to continue to make sure that this issue stays on the agenda? And so I think a new safety committee could help us do that. And then we want to continue to connect our DCRIM work to efforts across campus in terms of research and our community partnerships. We have incredible faculty who are doing work on this, and I got a note this morning about one of our new faculty members who's doing a presentation tomorrow at 4 o'clock on this. And maybe we could put that in the note when we send it out. So he studies policing, and particularly in how bias and those things enter. And so he's going to be reporting on his research. We have an incredible urban studies department that's always looking at these issues. Our social work and criminal justice faculty members are always looking at these issues. And in fact, one of the things that we talked about when I met with the task force was really thinking about those criminal justice students who might aspire to have law enforcement careers. And maybe what we do is bring our career services people together with our faculty, because I heard that our faculty had never been in those departments, had never been asked how they would like us to move forward. So that is part of what we would like to do, is bring our career services and our faculty who are doing this work together so that we can move forward in a way that decreases harm to students while providing opportunity for those who want to work in those fields. So that is where we are. I think one of the reasons I'm up here presenting the task force work instead of them, I am a huge believer, even when I was teaching, that people should present their own work and that others should not speak for them. But we did not have any members of the task force who wanted to do the presentation, so I said I was happy to present it, but just I want to acknowledge and thank those members of the task force who did this work. And this is a very difficult topic. Not everyone agrees, and you get just a continuum of what people mean when they say decriminalize UWT or defund or divest from police. No one person, if you ask 10 people, you'll probably get 7 or 8 different answers about what it means. So I know that the work of the task force is really difficult, and so I appreciate you all for doing it. And I'm hoping that we can get a permanent group that will continue to hold this university accountable as we move forward on this work. So with that, any questions, Joe, from folks in the audience? Or any observations from any of you here who might have been a member of the task force or involved in the original list of demands?
Yes, so now this is the town part of Town Hall. So if you would like to ask a question, please come forward to one of the mics. And if you are watching at home, you can send in your question to uwttownhall@uw.edu. And I will read the first question that came in from there, which is a 2-part question. Are there any plans in place to provide students with an immediate, mobile, non-police crisis response? Second part, if they are in place, are they able to provide culturally competent responses for our BIPOC students?
So I think there is in place, I'm looking at Memphis, yes, That is already in place. So I think that's part of we have it, but no one knows about it. And so getting that information out, having student affairs work with our communications team. Maybe it's something we just need to send out quarterly, and I think this is one of the ideas that came up in my conversation with the task forces. So you send it out at the beginning of the year, but then when I need it, I can't remember what happened in September. So maybe doing these reminders on a quarterly basis about here's what we have available, and making sure that students and faculty, a lot of times faculty are dealing with this because students are exhibiting behaviors of concern in the classroom. And so we really want to make sure that our faculty know who to call and how to deal with it. And it could be just making sure that we do this on an ongoing basis rather than just sending it out once a year. Yes, Mintha? You want to add to that? Yes, you want to add to that.
So thank you for that. And so just as an example, we have made reference to the purple sheet. So the purple sheet is a document that we circulated in this space at one point in time. It also is available online. And those individuals individuals of our community who subscribe to the UWT line, you might have noticed last month we sent out an informational notice, and it also made reference to the purple sheet. So we are indeed disseminating that information frequently so that individuals are aware of the various resources that are available for students who are not only in distress, but students who are just in need of having a conversation that's connected to their mental health and their well-being. So yes, take a look at the UW Tacoma Student Affairs webpage, bookmark it, scroll over to resources, and there's a whole host of information there regarding MySSP, which is 24/7 real-time mental health support. There's information there about our Title IX processes. And then also there is a full document of information that we refer to as our emergency protocols. We began developing those in 2017 and looking at all the research that's out there and also the better practices within higher education and elevating and refining the things that we do here on this particular campus. So I absolutely appreciate all the feedback and recommendations. It helps us strengthen the work that we do. But again, want to reinforce the fact that the information is there and available. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And you know, I think having the information there is great, but if no one knows about it, that's the problem. So we're going to commit to continually communicating about the information and the resources that we have.
Hi, thank you so much for the attention to this issue. I have two questions. One is so I really appreciate the desire to make sure that the recommendations of the task force are actionable. And I wondered if it's possible to create a living document or a website where the precise status of those recommendations and sort of what actions have been taken or are in process of being taken can be documented on an ongoing basis. And then my second question is, I understand the budget pressures, but if there isn't currently resources to be dedicated to things like that require a budget, and other than the funding that may come through the legislature this year, what does the budget need to look like for those resources to be dedicated?
I think so the first question is, yes, we can create a website where we can list this. This is part of holding us accountable. So it's actionable and then accountable. Are we really doing what we said we were going to do? And I'm going to make my plug again for I really think we need to have a standing committee on this. But a website is easily done. And we can make the task force a report available because it's sort of hidden right now. And I think this is an ongoing conversation. Is not a one and done. That's how you make progress, and you know, people will tell us what we're doing wrong, or some incident will happen, and we'll learn from that, and we'll adjust. So it's an ongoing process. So having a website is actually a great idea, because then we can also link to the UW Seattle has created a resource page for this Reimagining campus safety. So we can bring together all of those resources in one place and then list what we're doing here at UWT. So the second question is, what does the budget have to look like in order for us to fund new positions? It has to just not be in deficit. I mean, that is a $4.3 million deficit is severe for Tacoma. And so some of the things that we are doing is really examining every position that becomes available to say, do we really need to fill that position? We're limiting spending and traveling, not eliminating it completely, but really thinking strategically about, do we really need to do those things? And we're going to be looking at organizational structure and maybe doing some reorgs, trying to do everything we can other than layoffs. I can't promise that that's not going to happen, but $4.3 million is a lot of, it's a significant issue. I think that, and we're looking at our enrollment mix as Memphis stands up. I remember that's the other thing we're doing. The reason we have a deficit is because our enrollment declined significantly, and we're not collecting tuition at the same rate that we budgeted to. And so having this serious enrollment decline is an issue. And we did just hire a new assistant vice chancellor for enrollment management, and we're talking to them about being more aggressive. Oh, hi, I haven't met you yet. We've just emailed back and forth. And the reason the chancellor's emailing her, I think her first week here, was because this is serious for us. We have got to get a hold of the enrollment so that we can have funding to do the kinds of things that we're talking about that we need to do. There has been some enhancement, though, and I think that's what Memphis is going to tell us about.
Yes, thank you for that. So I think it's important to also highlight the things that are in place. So let's talk about a student in distress as an example. There is a body that meets on a regular basis that's known as the CARE team. So the CARE team is able to receive that information under the leadership of Dr. Bernard Anderson and to do the triage, gather all the dots, connect them together, and to identify a plan of action to be supportive to the student. So that's one opportunity that exists. There is the counseling center. So our counseling center, under the leadership of Dr. Cassandra Nichols and her licensed providers, really do a pretty good job based upon the data and the assessments and the evaluations that we received of offering high quality care. There had not been a wait list until recently, and their work has been culturally relevant, culturally competent. Cassandra Nichols has expressed that during her interview, that it was really important that she was mindful of the demographic of UW Tacoma, and that she felt it was incumbent upon her and her counselors to always be mindful of providing services and support that are Tacoma specific, meet our needs. That's the second thing. The other thing is, the other thing that we heard is folks wanted more after hours care. So working with the tri-campuses and funding was made available for us to invest in My SSP. So that's the other resource that's available for individuals. If indeed we find ourselves having to deal with an after hours emergency, we generally do something that's homegrown, meaning Bernard Anderson will take the time to contact the student or contact the student's family, and from there link them to the resources here in Tacoma. In terms of after hours or off-campus well-being checks, in the time that I've been here since 2017, they've happened 3 times. The 3 times, they did not involve Tacoma Police Department that I'm aware of. So just wanted to offer that as a context.
I also want to acknowledge.
Sorry. And then there's one other office too. I'm so sorry. There is Advocacy and Support. So there is definitely Roseanne Martinez, who's available in that particular office to provide support. And we have an additional person in the counseling center that is Maddie Brown, who now serves as our health specialist.
Okay, great. And I want to acknowledge one of the things that Memphis said was we're finding that COVID, that there is a shortage of mental health resources out in the community. And so Dr. Marianne Harris has used her networks, and I want to thank and acknowledge her for that, to put together a list of mental health providers in the community who said they were willing to step in and help us here at UWT. And so that, I know that has been sent to the faculty and to students as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Chancellor Lang, for holding this town hall on this important topic. I wanted to ask 2 questions, also one at a time, though. So in reference to President Caussé's initiative, Reimagining Campus Safety, is that the goal of UWT to reimagine campus safety? Because based off of the DCRIM UWT report and your responses, it seems like it's more of reformation work or retooling, reorganizing, instead of reimagining what campus safety could look like.
I think it's both, because we have got to retool, but we also have to reimagine what we mean by safety on campus. We're an urban campus, so what do we actually mean by that? And it means different things to different folks. And I can tell you from communities of color, it has a totally different connotation, what it means to be safe, you know, or what it means to feel safe. And you don't always feel safe with the police, including me, and I'm the chancellor. So I get nervous when I see a police officer behind me. And you know, I've not had good experiences with police officers always. So it is about reimagining. That's why I think the work with the urban serving universities for us is going to be so important, to look and see what our peers are doing, how they're doing it, and how we are reimagining safety without this huge military presence of police, armed police.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, because you know, as students, you know, I definitely want to push us towards reimagining, because it seems like, you know, there's this consensus that this system works. We just need to make it a little bit better for students. And I think that for a large group of students, students of color, students with disabilities, I think that this system is not currently working. And so I think reimagining how it can work for all of us is what we're asking for. And then my second question is how are students being brought into this process? I know that there was a student, my predecessor, who served on this task force. But I know as a student representative myself, I can't possibly represent the needs and desires of all students. So how are students being brought into this process, and are you engaging with student groups on campus?
So we have done it through there were 2 students. There was a graduate student and then the ASUWT president who served on the task force. And I think this is why I keep coming back to, we need to have some body or group that convenes and brings folks together around these issues. And students definitely need to be at the table. I'm open to suggestions for, you know, how we can better imagine that. I'll tell you one of the ideas that I have, and Mintha and I are meeting after this, so that I've looked at the Bothell and the Seattle campus, and there's a student advisory board to the chancellor on those campuses. We don't have anything like that here, where I'm hearing directly from students other than student leaderships. And you do a wonderful job, Andre, of representing the students, but just getting more students who are not in leadership roles to you know, share what's happening on the campus with me, the chancellor. So thinking about that as one way to get more students involved, to hear what concerns they have. And I know this is at the top of the list.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Any from the online?
Is there anyone online? Yes. Oh, there is? Yep. I still get to go? Okay. Hi. My name is Michelle Sturgis. I'm a doctoral candidate in the Department of Communication on the Seattle campus. And I'm also the Vice President of Equity and Inclusion for the Graduate and Professional Student Senate. I got my master's at the Bothell campus in Cultural Studies, and I live in Lakewood. So, and I'm from Washington, was born in Lakewood. So even though I didn't encounter UW until I left the state for undergrad, it's important to me. It's a really big part of my community. So the question that I have is about these demands and the responses that you've provided. I'm wondering more about the relationship between the 3 campuses. So I've heard faculty kind of express like, oh, you know, Tacoma is like the ugly stepchild of, you know, it's definitely young, right? And much smaller than the Seattle campus, for example. And so I'm wondering, with this reimagining campus safety stuff that's going on, and these demands that are specific to your campus, how do you see your responses to these specific demands? What kind of structure are they providing for a long term? So thinking like my vision is to not see, campus safety would be no police on campus. And actually we would be having town halls devoted towards other things like building each other up and supporting one another, right? So that's my goal, but I also feel this imminent, that eventually there will just be more, and eventually Tacoma might do things different than how things are now, and especially with leadership from the Seattle campus, if they have armed police on campus and they've been present for how long until Tacoma has, So I'm wondering how your responses to these things right now, how you see those, what does that lead Tacoma campus to 25 years from now? It's a big question. Thank you.
As you were saying that, I was remembering that I worked at Western Washington University in the late 80s, and Western had unarmed campus safety and security team. And after a series of lawsuits, the university was forced to actually commission armed law enforcement folks on the Western Washington University campus, and it was very traumatic for all of us who were involved in that. So things can change, as you have pointed out, fairly quickly. We have not had that here at UWT. We've not had that sort of pressure to move towards armed police officers. I don't foresee that happening in the short term. 25 years from now, I'm not sure what's going to happen. As I've said, there's a lot of chaos and mayhem going on in the world right now. But I think in this effort of reimagining safety, if we do it right now, we can actually set the framework for what happens 25 years from now. Part of the reason I wanted to meet with the new police chief in Tacoma and the campus liaison to us is to set that expectation for what we want our relationship to be with the Tacoma Police Department. Because there are times, when things are happening and people's lives are in danger, where you may have to call armed police officers, but under what conditions, and what do we expect for them when they come on our campus? And what do we want our relationship with them to be? And it's better to establish that ahead of time rather than having to make it up when someone has called the Tacoma Police Department. I don't know that I could say 25 years from now that we wouldn't have arms. I would hope we could do this right now so that we wouldn't need that. And I also think that what's happening around the country, although this is taped and I probably shouldn't say this, although police continue to kill Black and brown people, despite all of the reform efforts going on, I still have to have faith that things are going to change. But I tell you, every time I see the news, and what happened in Minnesota last week makes me skeptical that we're really moving towards change. But having said that, I think that we can. The thing I love about UWT is this is a community. We can determine what we want for ourselves here and then work with other people who are coming into our community about the norms and standards and expectations that we want to have when folks are here on campus. So part of reimagining is being explicit about that. And I'd love to talk to you some more about what you're doing. I think that's part of the reason why I need a group. And I need a group of students that can continue to have these conversations so they're not just one-off, and we continue to make progress as a campus. You have no questions? No, okay. Joe, no other online questions? Is it? Well, as I said, we have incredible faculty members here who are doing research in this area, research and teaching in this area. And they are a resource, and some of them were on the task force to us, but we'll make sure that you get the notice about our faculty member, our new faculty member who's doing the presentation tomorrow. And we'll continue to learn from the experts that we have here on campus, but also determine what we as a community want for ourselves and how we move forward. So thank you all for being part of this today. We'll get the links out to you after, they usually go out at the end of the day or first thing in the morning so that you'll have those. All right. Thank you.